Hello and welcome to The Cable Connection, where we look at cables, how they work, what they do, various connectors, how they connect to one another, how connectors connect to cables, different cable types, just everything around cables and what we can do with them in using modern technology. I am going to have a quick run through of some common cables that are used in modern homes, for instance, or more so because my background is in designing and building smart home systems. I'm going to be looking at some of the common cables that you might come across in your own home, for instance. So we'll start with this one, which is a solid core Cat5e, and on the face of it, it's quite thin. It's very similar to old phone cable, and often it can be mistaken for alarm cable or what might be called bell cable, and in some cases it can also be used as control cable, because Cat5e is quite versatile, I'd say. So let's go ahead and strip one end off, have a look on the inside. Oh, my blade's a bit blunt, so let's try that again. So Cat5e is an Ethernet cable. There's the sheath stripped off. You often find these cords inside the sheath, which I believe is for stripping the sheath off. Although I'm not sure, correct me on that if I'm wrong, but I always just trim it off as soon as I strip it down. So inside an Ethernet cable, of course, you have four pairs of cables. You have your orange and white orange, blue and white blue, brown and white brown, green and white green. As far as regular Ethernet communications go, or fast Ethernet communications, you technically only need these two pairs terminated in the right way in an RJ45 connector, and you can get an Ethernet connection up to 100 megabit, or maybe even over 100 megabit depending on the exact length of the cable. With the addition of two more pairs, gigabit connectivity and multi-gigabit connectivity is possible. In fact, a Cat5e cable, if the length is short enough and the termination is good enough at both ends, you will or can run around 8 gigabit per second over Cat5e, which is quite crazy, really. But as soon as the length gets too long, then those speeds completely diminish. So each of these twisted pairs, if I can get my screwdriver in there. Oh, oopsie, because there's a short length, this is just completely pulled out. That was not the intention there, but yeah. So these twisted pairs can be separated out for termination, and I mean, you probably can't even see the size of the copper in there, but obviously each one of these has a copper core, so there are 8 copper cores in here, and they are tiny, but like I said, a versatile, useful cable, and one of the ones you'll probably come across most often in modern homes. Actually, it doesn't even have to be modern. Cat5e's been around for so long. If anything, I tend to see this as a need for replacement, as in when there's Cat5e in, I always suggest replacing it with Cat6 if possible. Next one on the horizon, so that was Cat5e solid core. This one is very similar, slightly thicker. So this is Cat6 but stranded core. The difference being in solid core is there is a single copper conductor. So if I strip this inner sheath off, if I can, this is a bit tricky because it's so thin, it's easy enough to cut. If you can just about see that there is just a single copper conductor in each one of these cables here. So if I go ahead and strip away the sheath on this stranded core Cat6, again you have your 4 twisted pairs, and I will separate out one of them. So you can see straight away these are a bit more malleable as well because of the nature of stranded cable. If I strip that back, so there, if you can see that, smaller cores, but you have multiple copper cores, so that's a stranded core. Now, this being Cat6, overall the diameter of the copper combined is thicker than it is in Cat5. That's one of the major differences between all the cables, is that the conductor is bigger in each consecutive cable standard. So between Cat4, Cat5, Cat5e, Cat6, Cat7, Cat7a, 8, etc., 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 the cores do get bigger. One of the other differences between Cat5e and Cat6 is how tightly they are wound. So in Cat5e generally the windings are fairly loose. You can see the actual overlap in the windings are quite spaced apart compared to in this Cat6 where it's wound a bit tighter. The tightness of the windings is what gives, or partially gives, Cat6 its advantage over Cat5e, because it allows for better noise suppression and higher rates of data transfer and higher bandwidths. There is a whole video about how and why that works, I believe on the Veritasium channel, so I'm not going to get into that because it takes a good couple of hours of explaining physics and light and just everything we don't need to know about to get to grips with some data cable, or in this case Ethernet cable. So Cat5e, Cat6. Sticking with the data cable varieties, this one here, as you can see, very rigid, and on the inside there is some foil there as well. So this is a shielded Cat6, which is very similar to Cat6a, especially when it comes to the thickness. So straight away, I don't know if you can really see that because this one's a black cable, but there is a discernible difference in thickness there. And this one's a bit tougher to get apart. I've cut through the foil as well. So let me see if I can get the foil out. Yeah, there we go. So there's the outer sheath. This is the foil. So this foil shielding goes around all of the cables in there, which stops interference from affecting the data that's being transferred over the cable. I say stops interference. It greatly reduces interference. So then that's the shielding, and then you also have, instead of a bit of string, you tend to have, this is actually a steel, what's called a drain wire or a ground wire, which in the terminations for shielded cabling needs to be connected to a shield on the connector to allow, or to ensure that there's shielding end to end. And then additionally there will be some other packaging or protective packaging on shielded cable, and this is statically charged, so it sticks to everything, as you can see. Let me just get rid of that. There we go. Get rid of the static. And as you step up in Cat6, shielded Cat6, Cat6a, etc., you also have this plastic divider between all the pairs. So this also helps with increasing the possible data rate for the cable, in that it helps with shielding interference between pairs. And this one, I believe, is also a solid core as opposed to stranded. Let's just separate that out and strip this bit off here. So yeah, as you can see there, just a single copper core, but straight away, if you were to see this up close, there is quite a difference in the thickness of the copper between the Cat6 and the Cat5e. If anything, it's probably almost double the size. It probably isn't double the size, but to the eye it looks almost double the size. So that's shielded Cat6. I'm not even going to try and twist this one up because that one is really rigid. Right, then another type of data cable, which is not really a data cable or a control cable. If you've ever used or installed RGB lighting, you'll be familiar with this. Fairly straightforward. So you can just tear these ends apart because they're just essentially glued or bonded together. You've got your RGB lines there, red, green and blue, and then you'll have your voltage lines there to actually power the lighting strip. The only reason I included this cabling here was because, like I said, in modern homes you are very likely to see this, especially if there's any LED RGB lighting in place, where you get the RGB strips, for instance. There will be this cable in place linking the various strips together. Now these also come in various sizes and lengths and numbers of cores, so you can have different control. So you can get one as well with additional white lines for controlling a separate white LED, for instance, or you can get one without the white, so it's just red, green and blue, and either a ground wire or a voltage supply, depending on how the LED works. So this cable is, obviously, as you can see, there's no twisting or shielding or anything because it doesn't really carry data. It purely carries voltages and strip back. So it's stranded core, and I think this is either steel or aluminium, not quite sure, but yeah, it's a fairly cheap cable. It doesn't have to, like I said, carry data. It doesn't have to resist interference. It just needs to carry a voltage from one end to the other as best as possible. Then let's move on to coaxial cable. So this would have historically been used mainly for connecting an aerial to a TV, but in modern days this can be used for so much more, especially with Ethernet over coax technology becoming very good in that you can, oh that's quite tight, so sheath off. With coax now you can get gigabit connectivity up to between 300 and 500 meters, which is just crazy. So coaxial is made up of essentially two components. You have your, let's call that the positive wire, the nucleus there, which is generally copper. In this case it is copper. I'll strip that back in a second. Then you've got some sort of insulation, a shield, and then you've got the ground, as it were, which also forms a shield for the signal that travels down the middle there. So if I just strip this back, there you can see a thick piece of copper running down the middle. You can also get this with aluminium or steel, I believe, but generally the better quality coaxial cable has a copper conductor and shielding, as well as a decent insulator, which is solid, because you can also get this as a hollow insulator. I'm not sure if there's an advantage or disadvantage between the two, but the higher quality cables I've always seen has been this solid foam insulation between the conductor and the shield. So that's coaxial cable. I've got a few coaxial connectors here. These typical TV ones where obviously this isn't stripped correctly, but that goes through there, that twists onto there. That can be converted as well. So here we've got a BNC connector, often used with CCTV systems, but I digress. Next, speaker cable. One of my favourite. Speaker cable comes in so many different flavours and colours and capabilities. By capabilities I just mean sizes, for instance. So it's the sheath off. Again, speaker cable has this, tends to have this little string in there. Trim that back. This is a fairly rigid speaker cable. I believe it's 16 gauge, maybe 18 gauge. And if I strip the inner sheath off, which this one's not wanting to play ball, it's quite tough. Come on, get off. It will come off. There we go. So, speaker cable, many strands of copper conductors. With speaker cable, generally speaking, you want high quality copper for the best signal delivery. There are some companies that manufacture silver plated copper cabling, but generally speaking, copper will do 99.99999% of the job, and the higher quality the copper, the better the signal and voltage delivery will be, even over very long distances. These don't have any shielding because this is technically a high voltage signal that runs through here, so it's not that susceptible to interference. And then you can get aluminium speaker cable or copper clad aluminium speaker cable, but over long distances it loses quality because it has a very high resistance. Copper has a low resistance. In fact, you might find sometimes that speaker cables, especially if you're in the market for buying speaker cable, you'll probably find that a lot of this stuff available online, especially like on Amazon, is actually lower quality than like household electrical wiring, which is a terrible shame really, because they charge a premium for speaker cable. So yeah, oh there it is, yeah, 16 gauge 2-core speaker cable. And obviously you can have, well, so this is the most common type, is a 2-core speaker cable. So you have your positive and negative. This can be black and red as well, and then you can also get 4-core speaker cable. So it has, generally speaking, red, green, black and white. So you can run 2 speakers through, or at least a stereo signal through a single cable. So that's speaker cable. And having mentioned power cable, let's move on to power. So this one here is a 3-core flex, which is what you would find in the likes of extension leads, you know, anything that's plugged into a main socket in the wall. Strip that back. So you'll note this is actually very similar to the speaker cable. So both of these are 16 gauge, or I think I make it 1.5 mil area on the end of the cable, and that's why I was saying that sometimes you'll find that household electrical cable is better quality than some speaker cables, because that is made, especially in England, that this is made to a British standard. It has to be a certain percentage of oxygen freedness. What's the term I'm looking for? It has to be certified oxygen free copper, so high quality copper with no impurities, none of that. Whereas speaker cable is largely unregulated, and they can basically throw whatever they want in there, even if it's not, you know, a proper conductor. And you will actually note that if you ever take apart let's say a Bowers & Wilkins speaker, for instance, you'll actually find these colours, brown and blue, used on the inside of the speaker cabinet itself, because they recognise that British standard certified oxygen-free copper is higher quality than stuff you might find off the shelf, and that's what they tend to use inside of their speakers. And obviously Bowers & Wilkins are a fairly well renowned audiophile speaker manufacturer, so yeah, it's worth noting. This works perfectly well as speaker cable if you're ever caught short of actual speaker cable. Just don't tell any audiophiles that, because they will probably shit a chicken. Right, so a couple more power cables. So this one here is 2.5, which is the power cabling that you would find inside the walls of your house, for instance. So let me just get this opened up a bit. So we've got the earth there. So obviously when you're terminating this, you would have an earth sleeve to put over that to signify that is earth, and then you have your live and neutral, and all three of these are just single copper conductors. Fairly straightforward. If you've ever done any electrical works, this is something you've probably seen a million times. I wouldn't recommend using this for speaker cable because I don't know how solid copper strands stand up to the needs for how audio works in a cable, but maybe that's something I'll test at some point on this channel. And then this one, as you can see, is slightly larger than that there, but that's because this one is not twin and earth. This one's actually 3-core and earth. And if you've never come across this before, you might wonder, hang on, but where's the neutral? Why is there no blue neutral cable? Oh, come on, this is so... There we go. So you've got obviously the earth without any sheath or shielding there, and then you've got your brown live as you'd expected, and then you've got two more, black and a grey, and you think, what do I do with those? So if you've ever come across multi-phase electrical wiring, so like 3-phase wiring, those would be your 3 phases, the brown, black and the grey. But that is something that's disappearing, especially from normal household wiring. So what this tends to get used for a lot is for switched wiring. So you've got your main supply there. Then this, you'd say, put a blue sleeve on the grey one, so that acts as your neutral, and then you would put a brown sleeve on the black one, and that would be like a return switch leg, and then that can be used for two-way switching or multi-point switching for lighting circuits, etc. I'm not going to get into the details of it because that's more of an electrical thing, but or more house electrics thing. But yeah, anyway. So anyway, there are some basic cables that you might come across in your house or modern home or even a smart home, or if you have speakers or data points around the house. And going forward, the ideas in each video, I'll be looking at the cables, so like Cat5 for instance, how to terminate it, the different types of terminations you can get and how you can join them. So for instance, this is quite an interesting box. This is actually for, okay, so this one's for Cat6, but if you've got two cables like this, they're open and you want to join them together, you would use one of these coupling boxes, and then you punch down the cable ends into this box, and I'll get on to what I mean by punch down. And then similarly for the coax, one of these old aerial connectors, how to terminate those, and a variety of things. So yeah, if you want to see more, be sure to hit the subscribe button, and like I said, I will be aiming to upload one video every week, with Friday being the release date for each week. Oh, pardon me. Until then, that's been the cable connection, and this is what we'll be getting up to. Happy New Year and catch up soon.